Hi everyone, for this next session of the online conference AGL Profitability Hub second edition, I have the immense pleasure to welcome some of the people that have been working behind the scenes on behalf of the whole industry in order to help us dealing with regulators and more broadly the perception that short-term rental can have outside of mainstream media. So I have the pleasure to welcome MERILEE KARR from the UK STAA, ENRIQUE ALCANTARA from APARTUR, HOLCOMB from VRMA, KRAUSS LASSEN from the European Holiday Homes Association, and David KRAUSS from Rent Responsibly. So before we get started, can we have a quick roundtable of introduction, and you can just tell us what association you're representing and basically where are you speaking from today? MERILEE, you can start.
Yeah, so I represent the Short-Term Accommodation Association. We're the UK industry body, and I'm the CEO and founder of Under the Doormat, so I also have experience as a property manager.
Okay. Carlos?
Well, I come from the European Holiday Home Association. Also, I'm the CEO of the Danish Holiday Home Association, and yeah, we are still alive.
Okay, nice to hear. Greg?
Hi, Greg Holcomb. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Vacation Rental Management Association, and I'm here in Washington, D.C.
Perfect. Enrique?
Hi, I am the president of APARTUR. APARTUR is the association in Barcelona. We represent 280 companies that manage around 7,000 properties. Yeah, I'm here in Barcelona.
Okay, perfect. And Dave KRAUSS, you come last but definitely not least. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'd be glad to. My name is David KRAUSS. I like to think of myself as a short-term rental owner and manager first. That's how I got started. But right now I'm the founder and CEO of Rent Responsibly. We focus on sustainable advocacy solutions, and I'm very excited to be here, so thank you.
Perfect. You're more than welcome, and thanks everyone to take time on your busy schedule to come discuss the association and is there a case to consolidate our lobbying power as an industry within the next month and next years. So let's get started now, and I will ask that question first to you, Carlos. So if we look at the landscape of association, and you already alluded to that, saying you're the president of the European Holiday Homes and also the Danish Holiday Homes, there's lots of structures that are working together. According to you, how these different structures could work together in the most logical and meaningful way in order to get results in terms of policies?
Yeah, well, I would say our industry is, within the tourism sector, we are the least mature when you come to trade associations. So you have the hotel sector being there for years, organizing themselves. You have the travel agencies, even if it's a sunset industry, as we saw with Thomas Cook, and we will see after the help packages run out. Well, they are very well structured and very well represented, where you could say the short-term rental industry within itself is very unmature and also fragmented. I would say that we've seen now as industry that we really need to get together. So the necessity is bigger than ever, and God help that we had associations so that we could have some basis, but we will need to think about it in the future.
Okay, so basically people adhering more to those associations to get some type of representation and make sure that their voice is heard. Greg, you want to pick up on that as well?
Yeah, I think Carlos is absolutely right. You know, we've seen an influx of management companies throughout the world. We're an international association, so we hear from all over parts of the world, and they are relying on associations more for representation, for education, for guidance, which I think adds to that maturity, the professionalization of the industry, which is part of our vision and mission statement. And I think one of the, talking about the structures too, I think part of it is relying, as an international association, we rely on the local, state, federal, national, continental organizations that are out there. So, I rely on EHHA's updates to find out exactly what's happening on the ground in Europe. you know, as much as hopefully he relies on us for information about what's happening, you know, in the US or in other parts of the world.
And if anyone wants to add something on that, maybe Enrique, with your very local and particular perspective in the city of Barcelona, where a local association is definitely needed to cope with the regulations from the government of the city.
Yeah, exactly. It is very, very, very important. And the regulations are so different from one town to another, from one government to another. You really need to get together and defend your interests, and that is absolutely clear. And on top of that, as Greg was saying, the guidance is also very, very important for the people, especially now. We saw it with COVID, everyone asking what is going on regarding employment, what is going on regarding the measures that we need to put in place, what is going on about it. And if there's no association, it's a big mess. And yeah, it's really, really needed.
Okay, of course. Does anyone wants to add something? Yeah, MERILEE?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that for me gives me hope about our industry is I think that by nature, our industry is extremely collaborative. I think we have a lot of small players, as Carlos alluded to, and it is quite fragmented, but I think everyone's really open to working together, open to solving problems, and open to finding innovative solutions. I also think that as an industry, we're still young in many ways, and I think that creates opportunities for us to be faster, more nimble, and to really respond much quicker. And I think, you know, having been on a number of different panels over the past couple of months, I think our industry is responding incredibly quickly to the crisis. And I also think that we are working well at getting into governments, putting forward the positions, not just of the companies in the industry, but also the hosts that we represent. And I think that's critical because our industry has an economic impact, which is not just for the companies that are operating, but also for all of the people who participate in our industry as owners. And of course, the impact that has on lots of local people who rely on this income for their livelihoods. And I think the more that we're able to work together, the more we can bring those voices out and really help to ensure that governments don't make the wrong decisions and really support our industry where we need it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you that the time to react to the COVID pandemic in the short-term rental has been really small, and the initiative that were taken by any associations have shed a very good light on what we can do as a collective when everyone comes together. Dave, I saw you raising your hand on that question as well.
Yeah, I get excited. I mean, this stuff really, frankly, is a frontier for our industry, and the better we do collectively, the better we all are. But that is a need that can't be serviced by just the people on this panel right here. It is a leadership that is only empowered by the growth and size of people following and getting energized. And I will say this, the unique thing about COVID-19 is for once we have a common enemy that effectively is impacting us all at the same time. Most of the time it's one city's, rallying and then they go back to business in other cities. But now that we all are in the same place, I think that's where a lot of what, like MERILEE said, the collaboration is happening across the board. And beyond that, we are part of the solution, right? We need to revitalize our economies. These are local issues, and in every city, every locality has that same local issue. So if we come up with one good tool now, it can go everywhere. And that's where these types of forums are super important. So getting involved is the first step, but then being efficient and organized and collaborative, I think we have a really bright future.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you on that. And speaking of representation, so nowadays, we often hear that the OTAs who are marketplace are discussing directly with governments. According to you, is it the place of a business to deal on that level? Or would it be maybe better for representative structures to represent the people with no money interest in mind, and just how could you take over that role effectively? And I will start with Greg from VRMA with that question.
That's a tough one. I do think that there is a place for the OTAs to have their representation in the work that they're doing, because there are going to be aspects of their business and that touches multiple industries, and specifically to their own business interests, especially on the technology side, on some of the the regulatory side of security and intellectual property, you name it. When it comes to our specific issue with the short-term rental debate, I do think that they have taken a more prominent role than maybe we as an industry would want them to. Not saying that they haven't done a good job. Sometimes there are conflicts in messaging that happen between the OTAs, which is problematic for the rest of the industry because of how small the operators are generally. But I do think that for the most part, there should be more of a collaboration on the management community's part to really put the voice forward on behalf of the industry, not just necessarily relying on one business or another, because in the end of the day, you don't know if that business is going to be there. You don't know if they have the best interests in mind. They always have to look at their bottom line too. Yeah. Whereas groups like ours, we're funded by collaborations or, of various individuals and companies to put forward messaging on behalf of everyone, not just one specific company.
Okay, so they have their part in the conversation as a member, as a part of the ecosystem, but they shouldn't be the leading voice in that conversation or the one we hear the most. Can anyone else pick up on that? Maybe Enrique?
Yeah, and this is also against their economies of scale. Whenever you need to act on local regulations, here in Barcelona, for instance, there's been 10 different towns around Barcelona doing different regulations, each of them. So it's impossible for OTAs, platforms to address all that. And also they don't have the knowledge also of the specificity of the local place, right? And that is lacking. The best example regarding that was dealing with neighbors, for instance, right? Or what is the impact on our activity into neighbors? And when you need to address that, you need to solve their problems and you need to find good solutions for them and so on. And you need to be very, very close to the ground. You cannot just be a platform, a big OTA, a software company, or something like that, right? So I think that is very, very important.
Maybe Carlos, yeah?
Well, I would say two things. One, the COVID-19 has changed that balance in how I see it. So we might have a situation before where the OTAs got too much representation compared with the property managers and the house owners. I think that changed with the COVID-19 situation. And just to put it, I think we should accept that we've been through a period where governments wanted the OTAs to deliver statistics, deliver data, deliver taxation, etc. So it was natural that they got a higher voice because they were picking on them. The problem was that in the end of the day, the problem came on the property managers. The problem came on the hosts, not only on the platforms. But as I see it, the tourism sector after the COVID has gone up on the agenda, on the national, on the international agenda as an important industry. Not only because they hit us hardest, but also because, as David said, we are part of the solution when we are going to rebuild our industry. So at least that's a good thing. And in that period of time, it's not saying, okay, I don't see politicians saying, oh, we need the property, the platforms, the OTAs to make the solution and be part of the solution. We see local mayors, we see property owners, we see property managers being in that forefront. We see David's, we see Marilene's, we see ENRIQUE's with the private companies being in the forefront of that. And I think we've never got so much public airtime on short-term rental as we have now. And I actually think we deliver. So that's for the whole of the industry. I think the COVID-19 will change that. I think that.
Yeah, I think just to jump in and add to that, I think what we've seen here in the UK is that the government really wants the industry to talk with one voice. So they don't want to hear from platforms and property managers and other people in the ecosystem separately. They want one party that can talk for all of those different areas. And I think that's where the industry bodies, many of whom are sitting around this table, are actually in the best position to do that. Because of course, you know, OTAs, property managers, different people have different interests, and it's about finding that common ground and coming up with a single position that overall is best for the industry. And I think the industry bodies are doing a great job of that. What I think is also interesting is if you look at the response from governments to COVID-19, is that many of them are coming up with solutions which are not OTA focused at all. They're actually solutions for the hosts, for the property management companies, the small businesses that are in the industry. And I think that's a really positive sign, because it means that they start to recognize that the ecosystem is far bigger than OTAs. I also think as an industry, it's super important that we speak with all of those voices, because my experience in talking to government is the more they understand both the complexity of the industry, but also the depth of the industry, the more they understand the value that the industry brings to the economy, and therefore the support they need to give us. And so, of course, it's always a challenge. And I think coming back to Greg's point, you know, OTAs are big companies and they have the deepest pockets. So, of course, they're going to have their own lobbying in the same way that that happens in the hotel industry. But I think more and more the OTAs are also recognizing the value that industry bodies play in a way that 2-3 years ago even they might not have. And I think they recognize as well that it isn't always best for them to be out there in that front line, but to allow the industry to come up with a position and put that forward in the first instance. And I think that's it's a massive improvement, because as Carlos said, it's an immature industry, relatively speaking. And if we can actually achieve that, speaking with one voice, it's going to make us much stronger. And I think we're getting there. And I think this crisis is helping us achieve that.
Yeah. And of course, all of the initiatives have been on TV with the Homes for NHS, notably in the UK, and others that locally have spontaneously offered their business to first responders and essential workers. So yes, all in all, I think that that crisis has helped shed a very good light on the operators besides the OTAs or other commercial structures. David, you wanted to pick up on that as well?
Yeah, just a quick 10-second comment. I mean, fundamentally, OTAs are big corporations, nameless, faceless, what have you, and these are local issues. So if you can't be local and walk into City Hall and talk about what you do to engage with tourism and be an ambassador for your community, that is what we do. We invite people from outside in, and it's not a nationally regulated issue. So lobbying and things like that don't really apply in the same way as many other industries. And I think the OTAs are starting to figure out the more they can empower the local level and help organize disparate groups, the more powerful and better outcomes we all have. We've never had a good victory in a regulatory outcome without a strong local alliance, and that I think is where the ground wars are going to happen. And frankly, better than not to be wars. They can be ground partnerships with our cities, and we all lift up together.
And that couldn't have been the best transition to my next question. So the hyper-local aspect is really part of the DNA of the short-term rental industry. So as you already alluded to, and I want to ask that question to Enrique more specifically, because that's Barcelona, but how the association can help to get a more comprehensive regulation on a very specific level while representing people maybe on a larger scale.
Yeah, I think you need to know exactly and to live the problems of your town or the place where you're operating. It's very difficult to feel those problems and to solve them from San Francisco. That's very, very difficult. So yeah, you really need to live that. And you are one neighbor more in the city, and you are operating here, and you are dealing with the restaurants, with the retail stores associations, and with everyone else, and with the neighbors that can have an issue, and you're living really the reality of the place, right? And that's how you're able to understand the issues and to put a solution into them, right? You're part of that situation, and that is very, very difficult to do from outside. It's extremely, extremely difficult.
Yeah, of course, you need to live the problem to understand them and then to formulate solutions that are, of course, in line with what people are feeling and living on their day-to-day. And of course, who more than a local association can bring their voice to that. Does any other have other perspective? Maybe Carlos, because you're working on.
I totally agree with Enrique, and I would say that the European Union has been in collapse. It just didn't exist in the beginning of the COVID. The European Union was totally absent. Every country for themselves, every city for themselves, everybody for themselves. And wearing the two things, my two jobs, the Danish, which is very local, and the European, which is the contrary, I've seen that the importance of the work we did as an industry in Denmark has been extremely important. And every time we tried to do it on a European level, it was mostly to share information, to know what are the others doing, but being able to raise the agenda on a European level or a global level has been almost important. I think when we start rebuilding, that will change, but and we will need it even more, and we will work together again. But it has really been the point you made about the local DNA. Well, that's just been proven because it was so local. And even in Denmark, we have big companies, small companies. The most important voices for showing the problems, trying to come up with a solution, has been our local, smaller members, because that could create the understanding of the things, while bigger companies had more difficulties, like, oh, they are big, they should pay for everything. And the host has a voice now. And I think host didn't have a lot of voices, neither in Southern Europe or Eastern or Western or Northern Europe, but the host really got a voice. And we also have hosts situation where they are not recognized for their contribution. So we need to learn from this, but now they exist. What do you other guys think about the hosts and the local aspects?
I mean, I think here in the UK, what we've seen is that, obviously it's still a collection of nations. So Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and we even saw that on a program like NHS Homes, which is a voluntary program, that, in Wales, they said each individual property has to get permission because of the lockdown. And we were trying even from a central level to get a kind of blanket permission if they're doing NHS homes. We made some posters about, this home is hosting NHS workers, because what we even saw is that, a lot of the holiday homes destinations, there was a real negative feeling from the communities that they didn't want second homeowners and visitors coming to their community. And so, even at that sort of local level, we saw big issues arising. And of course, to your point as well, it's very easy in those communities to be bashing Airbnb and things like that because it's some big foreign thing that's enabling the wrong behaviors, when actually it's often the local hosts and everything that are impacted. And so I think it's been really interesting to see the different reactions here, even from cities to vacation destinations, and how that's evolved. And I think what is important is, of course, to be aware of that hyper-local sensitivity and the differences, but also wherever we can to be working at a higher level, because certainly the way I see it, if we end up with a patchwork of regulations across the UK, that is not good for our industry, because what it allows is that NIMBYism, where local communities just say, we don't like second homes being rented out in our community and these different things. And I think we've got to be really clear that solutions which are, national, pan-European, whatever they can be, can still be the best solutions and can help everyone. And even when we talk about things like registration schemes and different types of regulatory things, and of course the regulatory debate is not what everyone's talking about right now, but I can assure you it will come back soon. And you know, again, that's for us to be working together to finding those solutions and getting them out there, because I also think that the number one thing that's going to come out of COVID is standards being applied to our industry. Cleaning standards, health and safety standards, all of these things. And, you know, we're very happy because, of course, we partnered with Quality and Tourism here in the UK 2 years ago and set up accreditation. And we are now seeing that, for example, for us to get our property managers onto the government procurement scheme, they have to be accredited. And so commercial opportunities are now dependent on showing that companies are meeting these sets of standards. And I hope, you know, whether it's the work, Greg, that we've done with you guys in VRMA or with you, Carlos, in the EHHA, that we can develop these standards at a global level. Because I think if we try in every individual area do their own thing, we're going to be lost. And we're not going to be able to stand out as an industry that is really capable of leading the way. And I think that's going to be really important coming out of the crisis.
Yeah, and also for the travelers to not have 20 different messages, it's really important. So there's clarity in the communication and they can understand. David or Greg, maybe you want to bring a perspective from what's happening in the US, where the response has been more led by the states. So David, I saw you raise your hand, so maybe you want to pick up on that.
Look, certainly want to pass to Greg on that one.
Oh, thanks. No, I think there's something interesting here that kind of combines some of these questions that you've asked, based on what like MERILEE was just talking about with the standardizations. There's been a desire from local governments, a need from local governments to understand what it is that the vacation rental community actually does. All of a sudden, for years, they sat there and fought the industry, but they really didn't. They were fighting the major OTAs. They were fighting the VRBOs. They were fighting the Airbnbs. And now they're learning that we're actually a collection of individual businesses, you know, individual homeowners that are out there operating, and they don't know what to do. And so we created a safe home program with the vacation rental housekeeping professionals here in the US, because we saw a need in some of the major states that just shut down vacation rentals, all of them, and still kept hotels open. And part of it was because they knew with the hotels, there was a standard there. They understood the standard because it was in their state laws. So with Safe Home, we were able to push that out in Florida specifically, where they kept hotels open and shut down vacation rentals. And county governments, the first 8 or 7 county governments that were approved by the governor to reopen, all based their standards off of the Safe Home program. And this was based on local property managers pushing the national kind of standard that we put together. I mean, we sent it out as well, but it was those local voices on the ground that were because it was at the county level. So they needed their local governments to talk to the state and say, these are the standards we're going to reopen by. And so it was a nice mix where we could work with the state level while the local managers worked at the local level. And it all came together, and now we have businesses open in Florida. But there is going to be a challenge still moving forward. You know, though there's still local governments out there that we've seen on the West Coast in California that are ready to shut everything down. You know, that's kind of been the epicenter in the US when it comes to this regulatory talk. A lot of bans have happened, a lot of owner occupied only, which in a post-COVID world, I personally don't understand how owner occupied units are going to be the standard for short-term rentals in a community. You can't keep social distancing when someone else is living in the house with you. That's not related on, you know, a stranger. Not saying there aren't ways to do it, but this goes back to the professionalization discussion. You know, you can be an owner operator that's professional, and maybe in some cases more professional than managers that manage 100 properties, if you're good at it. It's just a means of, or a matter of the fact that you're getting educated, you're getting trained, and you're putting together, or putting the standards that we're putting forward and the guidelines we're putting forward, and taking them to heart and actually implementing them. But that's, you know, going to be a battle that we're going to see down the road. I see this going right into 2021. And there's going to be an influx of regulatory discussions because of this. So we need to be prepared with that discussion on what kind of standards and guidelines we can all agree on to move forward.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And so as MERILEE said earlier, the narrative around vacation rental has been shifted by the COVID, and it was a good opportunity to showcase professionalism with the certifications, Home for NHS, Safe Home, as Greg has discussed. Can you elaborate maybe for people that don't know, what were the initiatives you were leading before COVID and what are the ones that you will lead after? I will ask Enrique for that question because I know there's plenty in Barcelona.
You're asking basically about the initiatives that we're taking after COVID?
Yeah, the ones you were taking before and the ones you are planning to take once the tourists are coming back to Spain and other destinations.
Yeah, I think the most critical part now is to ensure the safety. This is the most critical part where we have completely shifted our focus at this moment, right? We need to, this is our match ball for the industry, right? We know that our sector will have a positive impact because of the COVID, because it's the perfect place for social distancing, right? This is perfect. It's ideal. It's the best accommodation, the safest one, right? So we don't want to make any mistake in the process of reopening because we have everything in front of us, the biggest opportunity we've ever had to put our sector on the top of the accommodation industry, right? So that's why our focus is completely on safety, on cleaning, on all the standards that we're working on. And there's no other part that, of course, after that, making sure that the companies are still alive after the crisis, right? And those two elements are probably the key priorities now for us.
Yeah, Carlos, maybe you want to pick up on that as well.
Yeah, well, there's in that case, in matter of speaking, we are really professionalizing the industry. So we are speaking about statistics, standardizations. I got an inquiry about ISO standardizations, and that has been before and will be after. But what I think we should look into is that the new world after this lockdown, we will see more insecurity. That's for sure. People will not dare to make a booking for next year in September. They will wait until last minute. We will see more insecurity as businesses because we as well will have a very difficult situation. But also we will see that governments will be much tougher on us, I think. And that's my worry about things, because we've seen a lockdown that we couldn't imagine. Governments in the whole world closing down businesses, closing down people. Children couldn't leave homes. You couldn't meet more than one other person or maximum 10 persons. It's so extreme. The powers that the states and local authorities have been taking, that I think we should be aware of the possibility that when in Barcelona, Enrique, when the government of Barcelona say, oh, I think we will close down short-term rental, we always felt that we had some principles. Greg, in the US, you guys too, that we had the rights of the property, the right of the tourist, the right of the logic as well of that. We actually make new jobs, we make new things. And I think we should be prepared. It might be too pessimistic, but I could be very, very worried that we will look into situations where Amsterdam, zero short-term rentals in the city of Amsterdam. Barcelona, we don't care. And we've been using the European Union on the principles of proportionality, which is basic principles in any democracy and in any state, rule based on rule and law, that we could say proportionality. If you close down a short-term rental, why can't you have a hotel not doing it? If we have this, what about that? And also, you couldn't make new laws on things that had been legal before. But we look into a situation where the municipality of Copenhagen or Munich, if they don't like us, they can close us down. So we really need I think that we will see positive things, but we also should prepare for a state that many times is against us and will be much, much tougher, much tougher than we see today. Maybe I'm pessimistic, but I think we will see terrible things.
Carlos, I'd like to counter that, because I think actually your pessimism is very well founded. I always like to look at the optimistic side of things on balance as well. And I think there actually are a few opportunities. I really think this is our opportunity as an industry to set standards. So, I mean, you asked earlier about what we were doing before, what we're doing after. I mean, we set up STAA accreditation in the UK 2 years ago, and there are a few companies that did it and everything like that, but I think people struggled to see the relevance. And I think actually what we're doing different afterwards is that now there's commercial opportunities off the back of that, like the government actually being willing to have us alongside hotels as something that can be procured. But those standards are a prerequisite to that. And I think this is where, as an industry, if we can come out of this and have these clear standards like Greg's doing in the US and like we're doing in the UK, and we can standardize those across the world, show that we know what the best practice is, and really go to governments and say, look, we're actually leading the way. We're better than hotels. We offer the social distancing, like Enrique said. Our industry is actually better placed in this new world than the old industries.
Yeah.
And I think we have an amazing opportunity to do that now. But we've got to take it. We've got to work together. We have to make sure we don't end up with 20 different standards but one, you know, all these sorts of things, so that people can look to us and say, oh, we don't need to put extra regulations on you because you already have the right standards. I think it was actually very interesting, because I've heard of a few examples where hotels remained open but our industry was shut. It was actually completely the opposite in the UK. All hotels, bed and breakfasts, everything was shut, and our industry remained open. Only for essential bookings, but that was because of the relationship that we have with government, that we were able to really explain that we are responsible, we can take only essential bookings, but that actually there are people who need a home to live in during this period. And that, you know, it can help reduce instances of domestic abuse, you know, people who were here that couldn't fly back to Iran. You know, I mean, there's all different kinds of scenarios, and you can't just shut it down. You need to offer those places to people. And right now, you know, we are arguing the battle that if there is a quarantine period, that it shouldn't be putting lots of people into hotels. Actually, it would be much better to be putting them in homes for those 2-week periods. But we've got to make sure that we get approved and we're on those lists. But I think this is our opportunity to help our regulators and our governments understand what we do and how we are best placed in this new world to come out ahead.
Okay. So basically the main task of association will be to help with standardization, so this can be understood both by decision makers on the policy level and have a clear message towards customers so they feel safe to come into vacation homes instead of hotels. Maybe they even have this opportunity in the future.
There's another part of the equation too that I think is critical that we get right, and that's our narrative. I think there's been this broad-based narrative that short-term rentals are illegal and they're unsafe and you don't want one next door and whatnot. I think to MERILEE's point, as we lift standards, it'll force people who didn't know that they needed to get to a certain standard to really be concrete about where they need to get to, clarity for the rest of the marketplace, trust for the traveler. But fundamentally, we're a group of small business folks that are providing a massive accommodation option. 1 out of every 5 rooms in the United States is a short-term rental. And here are some statistics. So I just want to flag something before we run out of time, because Greg in the VRMA worked really hard on this alongside Rent Responsibly and AirDNA. We have a number of statistics that tell our narrative during the COVID moment, and we need to celebrate what we offered. I mean, we housed NHS folks in the UK. That's one piece, but the other side is 50% of the entire host. We've surveyed 1,400 people. 50% of the people took in somebody who was a distressed traveler, somebody self-isolating, a frontline medical worker, or an emergency worker. 50%. At the same time, the average stay went from 3 point something to 6 point something, basically doubled. So we're now filling this medium-term stay length. It's very flexible, right? The next pandemic, God forbid, we're going to be relied upon even more, and local government should know that. And the last piece of it, which I think is the most profound, is that 89% of people who responded to our survey owned 5 or less properties. Marriott started as a B&B above a restaurant with a couple rooms, right? The future of hospitality is in short-term rentals, and the more we can tell this narrative and promote it and lift it up, the more we, the regulatory conversations need to get sorted out, but people need to understand who we are and the service we provide.
Yeah.
So I think we can, Enrique?
One thing to add, I fully agree with what David said. We are also dealing with one more important thing after COVID, which is to reduce our dependency on OTAs. And at least that is one big thing that is we are discussing in Spain. It's being discussed in Portugal. I guess it's being discussed in many places, France including, right? How can we get together and with all the inventory we have and balance the relationship with the distribution, right? And make it more even and fair, probably. And that is one of the challenges ahead as well.
Yeah, and that's of course one of the big topics, because there's lots of discontent towards the way cancellation policies and extenuating circumstances have been managed during that crisis. And who better than the association can go and deal with more scale with those OTAs, because it's common that huge hotel chains have special deals with OTAs when they pay less for their distribution because they give them this amount of supply. And the fragmentation of our industry maybe made that conversation impossible. So that would be also, I think, one of your main tasks in the recovery phase. So you already covered quite a few questions that I wanted to ask about the narrative and how the perception have shifted after the COVID-19. So basically, what would be in your opinion, because you address and you said that quite clearly, that you both deal with hosts, individual homeowners who do that as a spare job or maybe their main occupation, and professional organization. Is there a difference in the way those two type of personas are seeing the post-COVID-19 world?
I mean, look, I think from a consumer point of view, the challenge is that consumers are going to want reassurance. So I think what we need to help the individual hosts and those kind of smaller operators with is an independent standard, which no matter how small you are, if you're an individual host, you've got 5 properties, that you can get that standard, you can meet it, and you can demonstrate to consumers that you meet it. Because I think for those guys, their worry is that people aren't going to be able to trust them because, reviews and everything have their place. But we all know that just because a consumer says it was wonderful and it was in a great location, that doesn't mean that they've met the right cleaning standards and used the right products. So I think that's going to be really important. I think for companies, the bigger issue is understanding how, what that balance is. So, do hosts now all of a sudden think, oh my God, this is way too complicated, and actually feel that having management companies is a bigger benefit than it might have been in the past? I think we may see a little bit of that arising. And also, even some hosts may feel less comfortable about interacting with lots of different people they haven't met. Certainly we've seen, owners that get a nervousness about having people come into their home. But at the same time, this is where, again, you come back to standards. And if you're able to reassure people with tangible things that address their concerns, then I think for everyone that kind of takes away that anxiety. And so I think for hosts, for companies, and for consumers, it's the same things that create that anxiety. And the more that we're able to come out with a narrative that we are safe, that we are professional, and no matter whether it's an individual host or a company, that there are clear standards that we all follow, that people can feel confident in. And if we can achieve that, I think we will beat hotels.
Yeah, well, I can agree with you. And Carlos, I see you raise your hand as well. Want to follow up on that?
Well, yeah, but no, it's very interesting. I think that we will see that hosts will be stronger. We've seen the technology enabling hosts to be super efficient. One property, 5 properties, 2 properties, or a part-time property, and you can just click and do this and that. And I think we shouldn't forget that the OTAs also created this industry by making summer house on the Danish West Coast available for Australians, and etc., etc. So the big companies will be even bigger. In Europe, we have 4 million short-term rental units on counting, and that's a very insecure number. And one unit can be 6 rooms, super top professional, and another can be 3 weeks per year in Paris. So it can be very, very different types of units, but it's 20 million beds or 25 million beds. And that's the double of the number of the hotel beds in Europe. We have 11 million hotel beds in Europe. We have the double in short-term rentals. And even though we have the biggest property manager would be Aways, having the Novasol brand, cottages, Landel, Green Parks, etc. They have 100,000 plus units, and out of a market in Europe of 4 million units. I think we will see in the next 5 years property managers with 300,000, 500,000 units, top professional, top standardized within the company. And then we will see house owners doing it by themselves, being just as professional as the big property managers. And we will see the myriad, I would say, what do we have in Europe of property managers? Professional property managers, 8,000, 15,000 property managers, some having 10, 50, 100, 200 units. I think it's that figures. And they will also be more professionalized. So I think, as Enrique said, we need to find new balances, but I think that the survivors of this industry will be, as Marilyn said, the ones able to standardize and to live up to a world with much more insecurity, with much more public power that can be used pro and against us. We will see change between the cities. Barcelona and Copenhagen will be hit, and Boston, while the countrysides, Costa Blanca, Danish West Coast, your coast in the UK will win, but the cities will be the problem on the short side, and we will see differences. So it's a completely new world with the same problems, just times 10, and it will go much faster. Very interesting. David.
One piece of it too that MERILEE said in terms of we're not competing with hotels. Let's get rid of that nomenclature too, because we need to understand that we have a different type of stay, a different type of offering, and a different type of entire experience. And so this idea, we can borrow some things like standardization from hotels, but generally speaking, if our average stay is 6 days right now, and the average hotel stay has historically been closer to 2, you know, when I travel and I'm staying somewhere for 1 or 2 nights, I'm staying in a hotel. When I'm traveling for anything over 3 nights or with over 3 people, you're in a short-term rental. And that is part of our narrative, is part of the value we bring. And if you look at the tail of COVID, you're gonna have work from home, you're gonna have more digital nomads, you're gonna have all these different innovative business models. How much has the hotel industry innovated in the last 20 years? They're starting to copy some of the things that short-term rentals offer, and we need to be proud of that and lean into that and tell that story and start to accommodate the different traveler types that we service.
Yeah. So you've all said that your associations before and now even more after the COVID-19, are leading the charge towards standardization, professionalization, regardless of the size. Are you seeing more traction towards your structure from property managers that maybe didn't know you before or were not willing to jump into an association, and now they see that opportunity of being perceived as professional? What has been the effect of all your initiatives towards your own structures?
I mean, we've had more members joining in this period than we have ever since we started. I think people are looking for organizations that can help give them the right guidance, help them know what to do, and represent them. I think what's also been interesting for me is that programs like NHS Homes that we launched here in the UK as an association actually brought a lot of new members in as well, because, you know, the people that are already being responsible, having that social consciousness, wanted to be a part of that and wanted to work with others who had that same philosophy and the same set of values. And so I think, interestingly, a voluntary program actually brought in a lot of members, probably as much as the people who are afraid of not having government support. But both of those things really drew new members in. And I think, you know, for us, we've more than doubled the size of our association in this period, which I think speaks to itself.
Yeah, that's completely wonderful, and congrats for that on your side in the UK. I want to ask that to Greg from VRMA. Have you seen the same thing at your level, or was it more to state associations in the US? What has been the result of COVID-19 on VRMA?
Yeah, what's interesting with us is VRMA doesn't have a chapter structure. So we're an international organization. There are state and national chapters that have, or affiliates we call them, that have aligned with us, but they're not necessarily technically part of us. They're, you know, independent organizations that operate on their own. What we've seen out of this is that there has been a strong demand from individual property owners and managers that have reached out for the guidance. You know, what do I do about liability issues? What do I do about insurance? What do I do about cleaning? Has anyone used this product? You know, can you tell me anything? Especially in some of the more remote places that you wouldn't expect to even have a management company. But what we've seen is a strong demand towards the state and local, as we had discussed earlier, but also from still having that overarching organization kind of helping. And we still believe that, you know, the state and local groups that we work with should be independent, as long as, you know, we can work together still, is kind of what the main concept there is. But out of this, we've formed 5 different state organizations, and we're working with a local group, a local coalition that's having a special issue in their own backyard. But, you know, we have resources that we're spending to help organize these groups. And it's bringing in people from outside. You know, it's bringing in not just from our industry, but it's also bringing in those other small businesses that are realizing, oh, wow, I really need these short-term rentals in my backyard, or I'm not going to have people, you know, at my pub or my brewery or my restaurant, or, you know, whatever it may be. So we definitely have seen kind of a more of a push towards that than we've seen in the past, but there's a very high demand for guidance.
Okay, Enrique, I wanted to ask you the same. Are you seeing more traction towards APARTUR? I know the regulations were tough in Barcelona, so you might already have that in the past. But what has been the effect on APARTUR of the COVID?
Yeah, we actually have more than 70% of the activity. We represent more than 70%, so it's already a huge number. But still, we were a little bit scared on the effects of COVID, if people would like to go away from the association to reduce expenses and so on. And no, it's the other way. They really needed guidance. They needed support as well, and they needed to explain what was their situation and their fears and exchange experiences. We set up a WhatsApp group of 200 people at the beginning of the COVID, and that has been it has been crazy to manage that, but the effect has been fantastic on people, and they were not alone, they were not by themselves, they were just with each other, supporting each other, and that has had a massive effect. It has been very, very good.
Perfect. And nice to hear that this crisis has brought people together more than set them apart. So I think that's also a good lesson that we can take from what happened in our industry and beyond, because of course we were not the only one doing stuff like that. Maybe Carlos, you want to bring the perspective of the European holiday homes?
Yes, of course. Well, I can say it has been crazy times, and it is still crazy times. I don't even feel that we are trying to put the fire down. We are running out of a building with a huge fire, and that's been going on for 10 weeks. We're still running out of the building, and the questions has been people calling, asking, needing support, knowing things has been enormous, and I have been following. I think especially the national trade associations have done a fantastic job. APARTUR, that's also part of VIVITUR. I've never seen VIVITUR and APARTUR so active, and the MERILEE in the UK, all the things you're doing, the Scottish, other trade associations around Europe, and the need for help has been massive and extreme. And we've been contacted to the EHHA from companies that were quite big, and we never knew about them. So that was maybe embarrassing on our side, but Europe is very fragmented. So suddenly companies that we never heard about asked us about it. And I would say, I think the VRMA is some better structured association than the EHHA, which is still in the building. And we need to actually find models to accommodate the needs of a European structure, which I think the demand is there hugely. So, but I would also say, we've also seen companies saying we can't afford to pay. And I think that we will see that problem for the next couple of years. And I fully respect that, that normally when people say, oh, the fee is too high, you just say, hey, come on, it's 2 bookings, right? Mm. Now, when people say the economy is squeezed, we know that they are struggling for their lives, and we should also be able to adjust that. So everybody's running faster than ever, of course. Yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else want to add on that? I'm leading to my last question, so that would be twofold, and I will ask Enrique first because I know he's a bit in a hurry. So if you were, if you were addressing both a property manager that's looking at us and who's not a member of any association, and a policymaker who might end up watching this panel, what would be your recommendation for the two of them, Enrique?
To the policymaker, especially, to understand the industry. No one understands the industry yet. There's very, very few people that understand it, that understand the positive effects, the negative effects, everything together, right? And what is this industry bringing into the city? For instance, we're now finishing a study in Barcelona about the taxes that we are paying. And we're paying directly and indirectly over $3,000 per month per unit in terms of taxes. That is what our tourist is generating, half for the accommodation, half for the spending in the city and so on. But that's a lot of money, and people don't see that. And you need to really, really understand this industry, because if you can use it for the benefit of the city, and that's a big challenge, right? And that's what they should be doing. And regarding property managers, they should join any of the associations, of course, because of the guidance that they will be providing them, it will be incredibly valuable for them. So it's mandatory.
Okay, perfect. Dave, maybe you want to pick up on that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's more general advice would be, in this moment in COVID, it's a great equalizer, right? We've seen a lot of the mighty fall. We've seen a lot of turnover, a lot of disruption, to say the least. That said, leaning into things like MERILEE's talking about, if you lean into standards, if you lean into following the safe home guidance that VRMA has put out, if you lean into leading the local advocacy group, which may or may not exist, these are real opportunities to accelerate and push your business forward. Why? First of all, everybody in the community is looking for leadership on the local level. And so I've worked with a lot of local leaders who say, you know, I've stood up, I've spoken at City Hall, I've gotten the, you know, coffee club together to talk about these issues. And pretty soon my unit count, if you're a manager, might have doubled because you're starting to be seen as this, you know, leader and source of authority locally. So there is so much opportunity from a real business development standpoint to get involved, to raise your standards. And then lastly, you know, for all those policymakers out here that are going to watch this, I mean, look at the economic opportunity that short-term rentals present. We are hiring people. We are inviting tourism, paying $3,000 per unit into your economy. Those people vote with their dollars. They could go somewhere else. They could go to a different European country. They could go to a different state in the United States. We need to embrace this opportunity from a policy standpoint, and you're going to see new olive branches coming out of our industry. We want to partner with cities. We want to make sure that everybody wins, and we love standards.
Perfect. Maybe Greg, you want to pick up on that, because there's been maybe some discrepancies in terms of policy decisions regarding the state. So what would you advise a policymaker who's watching us today?
I think my recommendation, one, I used to be one. So just to start off with there, I was actually an elected city council person one time in my life, and I was actually a town clerk, an appointed town clerk too. So I understand what it's like to be at that local level, making a law and enforcing a rule that maybe not everyone's happy with. But my recommendation would be, as Enrique mentioned, to really try to understand the industry. And the best part about this is we have seen in places like the victory we've had in Florida, where from the state level down to the local level, the local officials and the state officials reached out to the industry, listened to what we had to say, listened to the statistics that we provided to tell the narrative of what a short-term rental and a vacation rental is in that community. So if you follow that type of path instead of the path we've seen in the past where policymakers have locked out the short-term rental voices, have made decisions because the hotel lobby has paid for decisions to be made, and we've seen how those have not necessarily worked, whereas the other side is more collaborative and has produced better results for that community. So I would just recommend trying to find ways to understand, to reach out. You know, if you're going to make a decision on an industry, reach out to people in that industry before you actually make a decision. And then from the other side too, from the property manager or even operators, I think it's all about education at this point. You know, whether it's guidelines, standards, business opportunities, all of it falls on education. And that's where associations really come in. Is we're all about networking, we're all about education. We can help connect you to resources. To Dave's point of taking up the role of being your local advocacy leader, you know, the regulations aren't going anywhere. They've never stopped. They never will stop. So just because you won the battle this year doesn't mean you're going to not see anything come up next year, next month, next week. They could come up weekly. So being engaged in your community, being that local leader, and relying on your associations to provide you resources and guidance would be my other recommendation.
Perfect. Maybe MERILEE, you want to give your conclusion on that question as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very simply, I think for property managers and companies in the sector, you know, be part of the collaboration, be part of setting these standards, because if you're a leader, you're going to have a successful business. And I think every association is open to having more leaders and more successful businesses in it. And, you know, we always talk in STAA about the fact that we want to help the industry grow responsibly. And I think it's important, both growth as well as the responsible element. And for any company who sees themselves growing, you want to be a part of that dialogue. And I think for governments, it is about that open conversation, and it is about that understanding. And I think we all agree on that, because where they actually have the data, where they actually understand the complexity and the depth of our industry, they will absolutely see the value of it and want to support it. And I think the risk is that if they don't, then the unintended consequences of, rash decisions can be real. And we all want to avoid that because we want our industry to be making a contribution to every community where we operate.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't agree more. And every city that looks a bit to data realize that there's a very positive role of the short-term rental in the social fabric and economical fabric of the city. So that's really important. And Carlos, I will give you the conclusive word on that panel conversation. What would you advise a policymaker? I'm sure you do that on a regular basis, but use that platform as well.
Well, it's been a privilege being part of this discussion. Very interesting to hear the different parts, because I think we will see an industry that will be the leading industry in the rebuilding of our economy. And I think we've just seen the first tsunami, which was the lockdown. We'll see the second tsunami. That's when the help packages ends, and then companies will have to fire people. The economy will go down. Tourists will be more insecure. And then we have the third tsunami that could come up. MERILEE is leaving us, the rest of us alone in Europe with the Brexit. We've seen the euro being challenged very hard, and that will make changes. We've seen the American, European structures being challenged, and Asia and Europe, Asia versus the US. So there's so many tsunamis, so much insecurity, that the short-term rental sector will be the ones who can adjust. We have the flexibility. We are part of an infrastructure of restaurants, airports, transportation. So we are just a small wheel in things that can create new jobs. So I think that policymakers should think about rebuilding. We will need that all over the world, and look into short-term rental as that dynamic motor that we can be, and be aware not to do the opposite, trying to protect maybe a hotel and say, oh, then we close the short-term rental, or now I've got superpowers as a state, so now I can just close the beaches every second day. We need much more knowledge, as Greg said, much more standardization, as David also told us about, and a lot of that positive energy, MERILEE, you are representing, because we really have interesting world ahead of us. So after an hour with you guys, we are still alive, and that's good.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. We were social distancing via Zoom, so that's that's the way we can continue to contribute. So if I summarize, for property managers, make sure you're represented so you can have a voice in the conversation. And for policymakers, just make sure that you don't regulate something that you don't properly understand. Guys, I want to thank you very much for taking your time today to come and discuss with me. Unfortunately, Enrique had to leave. He had another appointment, but he's here in spirits with us. And for those who are available, we welcome you on the live kickoff of this online conference, Tuesday the 26th at 5:30 CET. Thanks a lot, guys, and I wish you all a great day, evening, or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.